Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Small Voices, Children of Parents with Brain Injury. I am Bridget Aliaga, Brain Injury Training and Services Program Coordinator here at the Association. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, a few housekeeping details. Because of limited time, we ask that you please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. During the Q&A section, questions can be submitted via the question text box. The text box option should be visible to you on the GoToWebinar toolbar on your desktop. If you are having trouble viewing this option, please contact Citrix Tech Support at 800-263-6317. Again, that number is 800-263-6317. This number should also be visible on your toolbar. Our speaker will do her best to answer your questions in the order at which they are received. Any questions she is unable to address may be submitted via email to the association. We will be recording this webinar session and plan to post it along with the presentation slides to our website, www.bianys.org. Information about contacting the association and viewing this webinar will be provided in a follow-up email after the presentation has ended. My contact information will also be included in those follow-up messages. Before I turn the microphone over to our presenter, let us begin with a quick poll to see who is in our audience today. Please take a moment to answer the question. All right, I will be launching that poll right now. All right, everyone take about 10 seconds to answer that. And another 5 seconds. And give everyone another second or two. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and share those results. All right, it looks like the majority of you, 56%, are a healthcare professional or a caseworker. The next 36% are affiliated with a brain injury program or organization, and the remaining of you are either a professional in the school setting, an individual with a brain injury or a family member, or other. So let me close this. All right, it looks like we have a fairly diverse group today. It's always great to see. I want to thank all of you again for your participation and for helping to spread the word about our monthly webinars. Your support is truly appreciated. It is with sincere pleasure that I introduce our presenter for today, Dr. Lois Tannenbaum. Dr. Tannenbaum is a lifelong educator who served for almost 30 years as a teacher and then as a director of the inclusion program of the Newburgh School District. 5 years ago, her son sustained a moderate brain injury. She then focused her studies in brain injury, became a certified brain injury specialist, and is now the director of the brain injury program at Putnam ARC. In her private practice, she works with individuals and their families who have been impacted by brain injury, as well as individuals with developmental disabilities. Dr. Tannenbaum is also the board president of the Brain Injury Association. Good afternoon, Dr. Tannenbaum. How are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by explaining that my voice is somewhat weak. I had surgery, cervical spine surgery, in December, and it affected my vocal cord. So I will do my best, and please send in any comment if you have any trouble understanding or hearing me. Thank you. And thank you all for your participation today. Our webinar is directed at the needs of children whose parents have been impacted by brain injury. We're going to look at things from a few different angles. First, looking at a child's perspective, then focusing on the changes and challenges within the family, followed by secondary trauma in the children in the families that have been impacted, and then some strategies moving forward into what we lovingly call the new normal. We know that when brain injury strikes, the impact is sudden, whether it be related to injury or illness, and that it affects an individual as well as their family members. Within that impact is the very small voice of a child in families with children and teenagers who are suddenly faced not only with the absence of a parent, but many other issues that occur in the family. The first thing is that the caregiving parent is the one who's immediately overcome and overwhelmed. So at the very onset, we first have a riotous rush because people are rushing to the hospital. They're rushing to get coverage for their children. There's a lot of known and, excuse me, there's a lot of known and unknown information. And so there's also some withholding of information, somewhat on purpose, because we don't want to really relay information until we're totally sure of what it's all about, and also because we're not present or we don't fully understand the information ourselves. Obviously, the parent who's been injured is not present. However, the absentee parent that the child would look to for supports is now consumed by rushing to the hospital and taking care of many other matters away from home and at home. This leads to that parent being overburdened, overburdened, frustrated, and really emotionally detached to a large degree, as well as physically detached. There are changes in the home environment. The children may be sent to a relative. They may be at home but have various caregivers coming in and out. So there's a real upheaval in their home environment. The routine is impacted along with those changes in the home environment. The things that were quote unquote the norm are definitely in a state of upheaval. So at this point, we know where the parent is emotionally and physically, and from the child's perspective, they're really looking at a lot of unspoken feelings. Children may experience a great deal of worry, fear, anxiety. There's also, it's important to mention the anger and the guilt, because they may be so angry at what's going on around them without being able to really understand it or frame it in their mind to get some answers. But just that anger alone can also lead to guilty feelings about that. They're very isolated at home, not just by the parents, but also from their friends and the activities that they would normally participate in because of everything that's going on around them. Although it's explained to children, it's very hard for children to understand that the bottom line is they feel abandoned on many levels because of what's going on. And as I said, for us as adults, and even for some teenagers, they are able to formulate the questions that they need answers to, but oftentimes being either young or overcome by the emotions of what's going on, it's very difficult to just frame the question to get the answer they're looking for. I also shouldn't mention that we as adults tend to over-respond to questions. So in looking at the greatest fear, it's usually related to the hospital. We have to make a decision if children are going to be going to the hospital. If so, we have to anticipate their fears about what they may witness and what types of things to prepare them with for before going to the hospital, in terms of whether the parent will be awake, are they in a coma, what they can do during their visit. Should they, we should encourage them to try and communicate on some level and not to be upset if the reaction seems to be somewhat of an agitation, because children are very unprepared for that, of course. When we get past the acute stage, if we move to the subacute stage and the parent is in some type of rehabilitation, and we're visiting those types of facilities, children are getting very anxious about how long is this going to be, why does my mother or father or primary caregiver have to remain here. I think for all of us, as family members of a person with a brain injury, during the acute phase, when we see the improvements occurring, we are very encouraged by every small step that happens. And as the duration of time passes, it's not that we're not still encouraged, but it's harder to look at the progress, and it can get very frustrating for all of us, and especially for children whose concept of time can seem endless when they're dealing with such impact in the family. When we get to the point of coming home, hopefully and wonderfully, the person is now home. However, a concept proposed by Dr. Pauline Voss related to ambiguous loss is one that has to be truly considered for both family members as well as professionals in the field. We have to look at the sense that the person is now physically present, but they may no longer be who they were physically and or emotionally. And so, in essence, the anticipation of the homecoming has been huge, but the reality of the stranger that the child may be faced with can be terrifying and deeply upsetting. So whether you are the caregiver parent or another family member, relative, or friend with whom a child is staying, it is wise to prepare the child for what those changes may look like.
All right. Lois, do you want me to launch the poll?
Yes, sorry, Bridget.
That's fine. All right, I'm going to launch a poll right now. I just want everyone to take a few seconds to answer that. Okay, the poll is launched. So the question is, how many have a family member who is a recently returning veteran? So I'm going to give everyone a few more seconds to answer that. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share those results. All right, so it looks like the majority of you do not have a family member, but a good 12% of you do. So let me close that and get back to Lois's presentation. All right, Lois.
Yes, the reason I was curious to know about military families is because we know that the signature wound of the recent wars is brain injury and related post-traumatic stress disorder. So I thought it important to include some information specific to military families, because whether or not you have a family member in the military, you may have children whom you work with as an educator or in the medical profession who have a parent in the military. And so the information as it relates to those patients or clients or students is of importance to you as well. The first thing that children of military service personnel deal with is a constant changing home environment. So that's something that military children are faced with that is different in preparation for absence of a parent than children who are not in military families. They deal with the deployed parent's absence, and oftentimes the home front parent is overburdened aside from and before any particular injury because they are now a single parent at home working on all of the home issues, school issues, financial, legal, medical, etc. However, no matter how prepared families may be for the absence of a deployed parent, no one's ever prepared for a returning parent who is suddenly faced with physical issues, cognitive issues, and emotional issues, particularly in relation to the trauma that has been experienced. This may add to increased psychological issues that impact children in post-deployment families. There is information about blast injuries that is significant for people to be aware of. We obviously know that a blast injury on a primary level can do a great deal of physical damage to an individual. However, the information that blast injuries can affect people at great distances from the initial blast contributes to the reason why there's such a large number of returning veterans with brain injury. These parents themselves may be coming home and not realizing that they have a brain injury until they're home and things start to get very, very difficult. And while they're becoming aware of this and experiencing it, so are the children. So the Brain Injury Association has 2 DVDs that may be of great help to interested people, whether you're a family member or a professional. One is called Coming Home, and the other is called Beyond the Invisible. Both DVDs are available both in hard copy and online. In addition, there are some great military sources online, some of which are listed here. And of course, if you visit any of these, you will find additional resources as well. The Sesame Street program is particularly beneficial to younger children. So what are the changes and the challenges that are going on? The more obvious changes that we can all witness are related to pre-surgical, if there's some issues with swelling and a difference in appearance prior to the surgery. There's post-surgical recuperation. A parent may be experiencing a hearing loss, visual issues, difficulty with balance. Fatigue is huge. It's often described as constantly moving to a state of going into screensaver. So if children are visiting in a hospital and the parents are up and able to speak, they're still may tire very easily, and children may misinterpret that as disinterest or inattentive behavior when it's a large amount of fatigue. Seizures may be the result of an illness or an injury that, if suddenly witnessed by a child who's never witnessed that before, that can be scary, to say the least, depending on the level of seizure activity. And so preparing a child for that possible occurrence is important as well. Headaches is something that I think is the #1 issue that people often talk to me about, no matter which family member had the injury. But there is sometimes people experience headaches for the majority of a day, portion of the day, but during that period they can be very intense and cause great agitation, which has then an overlay of emotional difficulty. Sleep disturbances, people tend to think of nightmares and sleep disturbances as being specifically related to military personnel, post-traumatic stress disorder. And a point I wanted to make in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, as a society, we tend to think of that as something that's specific to military. However, whatever experience, if there's a traumatic experience that caused the onset of the brain injury, then there's going to be some overlays of post-traumatic stress disorder. If they lead to the sleep disturbances and children are sleeping and suddenly hear a parent awaken screaming or some upset that they suddenly jolt the children out of sleep, that can be terrifying as well. It's not like children haven't experienced nightmares and don't have some idea of what that is, but seeing it from a parent who they've never had to experience that before is very upsetting as well. Overall, we're basically looking at the fact that the person who was the tower of strength, or the people who were the tower of strength in the child's life, are sort of on shaky ground, and that puts a child on very shaky ground along with them. The cognitive changes are often more difficult for many, including the survivor, the caregiver, and the family members, because they are not the visible changes. So we have a level of change in the intellectual functioning. This will impact, as I had said before, a large amount of fatigue and distractibility, a difficulty with concentrating. The short-term memory. Children are very focused on the immediate, and so things that they're focused on immediately, if they were forgotten about inadvertently because of memory issues, the child is going to feel yet again put aside by what's going on, because the events in their lives that are so extremely important and immediate to them are not being addressed. What I said before about the tower of strength applies here. The caregivers, the parents, are typically the problem solvers in the family, and suddenly people impacted by brain injury have a difficulty solving problems in the way that they did before, because it's a whole new set of problems that are quite huge and have to be addressed from a different approach. The comprehension in terms of when children are speaking to the parent and the parent seems confused or they're not processing the information, children can become very disturbed about the fact that they're not being understood, or that the information they're trying to get across is not being reacted to and responded to by the parent with the brain injury. I talked just briefly before about the level of agitation, which we'll talk about a little further in the emotional and behavioral changes, but people with a brain injury tend to have some level of hypervigilance because of what's happened. They're somewhat overprotective, and they can react with a much lower frustration level and a much higher verbal reaction to the issues that are happening around them. So many of the emotional and behavioral changes are related specifically to some of these issues. A person may be although there are many sub-category emotions, the primary ones are related to either depression or agitation, and all the others are somewhat in between there. So there's a lot of avoidance, and interesting that what's happening with avoidance is a parent may be avoiding situations or family members in an effort to be protective, but it's interpreted as being neglected. And so it's important to try and keep the emotional connections visible. The dependency, yes, suddenly a child will have to do some things for a parent that would not ordinarily have had to be done. The parent may have a great deal of anger, and likewise other family members will have frustration and anger. It goes without saying that when stress is very high, tempers can be very short, and people can impact each other, and life can become an action-reaction cycle. So someone, is doing something, someone else reacts to it, that creates another action, and so on and so on. And it can really spiral. The thing about inappropriate language or behavior, it's really tough for kids because they've been taught to follow, certain societal rules and what's appropriate and what's not. And suddenly it can happen that a parent with a brain injury comes home and their agitation is so great that there's a lot of swearing going on, maybe throwing things, breaking things, even some inappropriate sexual behaviors. And so it's really significant to address these as soon as they happen, because it's something that we don't typically think about. We don't necessarily anticipate it, and we don't think that it's going to happen that way, especially if the parent has been one type of way in terms of maybe being reserved or conservative, and suddenly their behavior is unexplainable. The relationships between people, this is whether it's the person who feels like they're suddenly the person in the bottle or the relationships around them. So families tend to become very isolated, even from other family members, because it's tiring for family members to, if they're coming from the hospital or what have you, to then be in touch with everyone and let people know what's going on. And they sort of isolate themselves to try and keep things together as much as possible in the home. But that does create additional isolation for the family, and connections that children are used to having may suddenly be on hold and suspended for quite some time. These decreased interactions are within the home and between home and other family, and as well as friends. Children, we try not to think of parents as being in a particular role, a gender-specific role, let's say. But I think naturally the routine in a family is that everyone in the family has their certain roles that they have assumed in terms of the family structure. But when something like this occurs, the role reversals may change among the parents. They may even change among the siblings. So suddenly you have a sibling who may have to be in charge or caretaking to a greater degree than they have before. There can be resentment among siblings of younger siblings who are not used to taking orders from the older siblings. And whether you're a survivor, a caregiver, and particularly a child, we know that the perception is the reality. So how children perceive what's going on is definitely the reality that exists for them. And I know that I have consistently used the term child or children in the presentation thus far, but not to neglect the fact that among adolescents, this is the same and worse, because the level of awareness of what's going on and the level of responsibility placed upon them, in addition to just the pressure of being an adolescent, is a really difficult time in an adolescent's life. So how do these evidence themselves? What types of things come through a secondary trauma that come through as actions more than words because of an inability to express them? We have certainly anger, frustration, and grief. For different children, they have one or the other of these responses, and even different responses at different times in response to the events of that day. Families at this point are sort of living moment by moment in an acute phase, and so a phone call can change the climate in a house. A child can come into school suddenly very agitated, and it's important to look for the signs of secondary trauma in children and teenagers. Withdrawal is a very real outcome. Children can be withdrawn at home, retired to their rooms, get lost in playing games or watching television, not going out, not having social interactions. They don't know how to talk to their friends about the changes that's going on in their family. I know that we had educators and other professionals participating today, and it's particularly important to try to reach out to the family, for families particularly, to reach out to the professionals so that they're aware that this has happened, but also for the professionals to reach out, to stay in a constant communication, and so that they're aware of the progress of things. Oftentimes they are, they've made a good enough connection with the child that they are the child's support system during that time when home is in an upheaval. The acting out behaviors, the reason I selected this picture is it's also about perception. You can look at this and say that the child is acting out. You can also say that the parent is overreacting. So this speaks to the high frustration in which everyone is sort of triggering everyone else. There may be, for young children, destruction. You'll see toys being broken, or possessions of theirs being broken in some way. For adolescents, there may also be a destruction of their property. We have seen adolescents being very overreactive, and not purposefully, but just because of the overwhelming emotion, just strike out at home and put their hand through a wall, break a door, just things that happen in a very reactionary manner. The school performance, interesting that the school performance may drop. A student who had a good handle on things may have a lot of difficulty. We know that as emotional affect goes up with stress, cognitive ability declines, and so there may be that overlapping impact for a child's performance in school. There may also be what I call a mini-me type of response where children begin to overcompensate. We are very grateful that we have responsible children and that we can ask them to maybe take on some more tasks, but we have to be cognizant of not putting too much upon a child in terms of what we're asking them to do. They still need to be able to be a child. And when a parent is not speaking about the day-to-day things that are happening and the child is reading between the lines, they can tend to try and overcompensate and become the caregiving mini parent. In response to trouble with authority, it can be as simple as responding to authority of a sibling or a parent or family member, or it can be quite reactive to authority, particularly among teenagers. Adolescents, all people's primary need is belonging. And that need in a teenager's life is usually the belonging to the peer groups that they are a part of. And when things are going very wrong at home, for a variety of reasons, in this case brain injury, the types of peers that our young people get involved with may not always be the best choices, and just by sheer emotion they may want that attention so desperately that there may be trouble with authority figures. Now, how do we adjust to the new normal? The most important thing, of course, is the communication. You have to think about, do you truly understand what's going on in terms of the language and the relating of that information to children at various ages and stages of development? So we anticipate the types of things that children will have become or will become very fearful of. We try to address those fears. You have to try and be as open about it and as honest as you possibly can. Sometimes it's very difficult to have that conversation without someone assisting you. So if you have a medical professional who maybe has some simplified visuals that can help you understand, well, this is what happened, and this is where we are, and this is where we're hoping to be. I never say to a parent, don't speak to a child about it if you're upset, because being upset is a normal reaction, and not expressing that could sometimes be more fearful, because saying to a child it's all right and everything's going to be all right when you know it's not, at that moment, is really a mixed message for a child. So if you have to do it through your distressed emotions, then you do, but it would be good to have someone there to assist you as well, so you don't have to go it alone. For hospitalizations, really try to encourage keeping the bond together by either having children visit if that's appropriate with hospital policy. As I said, understanding what's going on, but then figuring out how to present those details in an age-appropriate way. For children, we have to, as I said just before about being silent, it's much better to open it up, to encourage questions, you can sometimes predict things and put them in a question form so that you're verbalizing the question that a child is not able to verbalize, which takes a lot of pressure off of them. If they can express it through their words, we can have them express their feelings through their drawings. We can also have them remain connected to their family members by sending messages via letters or drawings that can be taken and put up at the hospital which is encouraging for a child as well as the person in the hospital. As you go through rehabilitation, there's that distance, especially if the parent is now inpatient in the rehab facility, that we keep those communication lines going and keep them updated on the progress that their parent is making, and understanding that when it's taking a good deal of time, that it will take a good deal of time. And if things are going to have to change over the long haul, so if there's going to be absence for a while, we have to talk about how roles will shift, responsibilities will shift, and any other changes at home. In terms of the parent, if you are the caregiving parent, we all know about the airplane theory of taking care of yourself in order to take care of your family members. Please recognize and ask for help. The fact that there are so many professionals on this webinar is a testament to the dedication, the commitment, and the willingness to assist of professionals in the field when this happens. We have to remember to schedule downtime for ourselves. Maybe that's downtime from everyone, and often we have to schedule time with just our children so that their lives and the focus on their lives and their supports remain very much intact. And yes, lots of hugs and kisses and constant reassurances, and the tools for children. Some of the best supports that we can give to children, whether we're the family member or someone working with the child, is to encourage children to be honest and open about their feelings. Even if they feel mad as hell, even if they fearfully wish someone would die because of something that they're experiencing that's so intense, we have to try and get the message across that it's okay. But it's not okay to keep your feelings inside, because we're all really here to help you. And that applies again to those negative, angry feelings. It's okay to just be a child. Yes, go out and play and try to keep some level of what you normally do in your life, so that you don't have to be the adult that's constantly worried about what you're going to do next. Also, once triggers have been identified, children should be educated in terms of looking for those triggers, especially when they're in a close proximity to a parent that may verbally or physically lash out because of problems with frontal lobe connections that impact the ability to have that stop mechanism that would ordinarily keep that from happening. So before things like that happen, we have to really try to pay attention to and explain to children what the triggers might be. Not to engage in the arguments. We all have those arguments with people. You said, I said, he said, she said, but continuing that type of argument can lead to a really reactive response. Children should know who to contact, who their contact people are in home and in other settings, so that they not only know who to talk to, but know who to call in case if there is really an emergency at home. Some of the things that help all family members through this process is, to the greatest degree possible, to return to your normal routine and structure. Now, I know that is so much easier said than done, having been there. But when, even as an adult, when you get to do one routine thing that you normally do and have not been able to do there's some sense of balance there. And for a child, that's very important. So we have to try and keep their home structure, even as far as discipline, in place, because it may seem like it would suddenly be awesome for a child not to have that discipline, but actually they feel like things are out of control, because as much as they like to be the one calling the shots, it gets a little scary when they're the person calling the shots and things go wrong and they don't know what to do about it. For many of us, checklists and calendars are wonderful external supports that help us on a day-to-day basis. When things have changed dramatically at home, these types of things are a lifeline so that life is more predictable for everyone involved. Timers, texts, and tip-offs. Putting some things in place so that, for example, if a parent who's home from the hospital, who's doing well, but has some difficulty with starting something and forgetting that they started it, there could be the use of a timer. We send text messages to remind ourselves to do things. And we have signals, little tip-off signals. And so will a child or a teenager suddenly take on some of these things? To a greater or lesser degree, depending on their age and their ability level to do so. But we can certainly, an interesting positive side effect of that is that time management becomes a greater asset in the family for all involved. It takes planning and preparation, and this is not just for day-to-day activities, but this is even in our conversations with our community and our schools and our medical professionals, planning, helping us to plan through what will this look like, what will this being, home life and a child's life going forward, what will that look like when they're in this setting or that setting, and how can we all, as a collaborative team, including home and school, work together to prepare what will we do if. So, for example, when a child or a teenager sustains a brain injury, we have a great deal of preparation in terms of what educators can do to address a decreased cognitive ability. However, when it's not the child and it's the parent, as I said earlier, we can have a decreased cognitive ability just because of things being in such upheaval. And so preparation with respect to some differentiated instruction, some modified levels of expectation are also part and parcel to addressing the needs of a child or a teenager in preparation for a family situation, whether they're in the acute, subacute, or back at home stage in the progress. Some hints for communication, and that's not specific to people who suddenly need an augmentative communication. It's just some, you can use some very low-tech strategies to support communication. For example, the parent's verbal ability may not be impacted in terms of their ability to speak, but it may be impacted in terms of their processing and ability to express themselves appropriately. So things like visual schedules, where you'd put up something that sets up the day so that one thing adults really have some difficulty with, and it doesn't really matter if it's coming from a spouse, and particularly if it's coming from a child, is the constant reminder. Now, we know that the constant reminder is needed. It's been indicated by the behavior. But as much as that indication is there, it's very difficult for a parent to suddenly hear from a child, but Mom or Dad, you have to do this and you have to do that, and you should have this and you should have that, and it can be tough to take. So what we're trying to do is increase independence for the returning survivor to the greatest degree possible, which alleviates the frustration and the dependency at home. Utilizing our support networks, we have to reach out to family and or people who we feel are as close as family in order to give us the networks of support that we need. Or one of the great things to do, or if you're a professional, one of the great things to advise a family to do is initially to create a who's on my team type of circle, graphic organizer type of diagram that we're very used to seeing. And it's important to get that information down, even though a parent may think, well, I know who to turn to if I need. It's important to get it down. Create that who's on my team, so that if something happens in an immediate crisis, maybe you can have that ready to go for someone who has to now take over when you're not there, so that somebody else knows, okay, who's on this team? Who can we all turn to help in the absence now of this family member, or in the presence now of this new added difficulty? That includes our friends as well. Reach out to community-based support groups. There are many throughout the state and throughout the nation in terms of groups that support survivors, caregivers, and children. The schools are excellent. They have several programs that work with children who are experiencing trauma on a variety of levels, including this one. If the schools do not have enough information where they feel comfortable in working with a family that's going through some level of brain trauma, they can reach out, as well as families. Professionals can reach out to the Brain Injury Association to find out how they can be most effective in assisting as a professional that's connected to the family. The clergy, whatever is your religious faith, and whoever you feel comfortable with on that level, can be another assistance. They're in that who's on my team circle. Therapists, sometimes that's a delay. That's not always what happens initially. You're dealing with so much crisis that it's not always well put together, but as things move forward, that it's a recommended support. And not just for the survivor who's going to maybe seek therapy for changes in their life, but also for the family counseling. So in summary, it's just simply said that brain injuries do not just happen to one person. The domino effect is very much what happens almost as instantly as the injury happens. And that effect to all, I have been a caregiving parent, and I am also a brain injury survivor as well as a caregiving parent, and so I know how much of a roller coaster life can be. But in particular, when you are a child or a teen in a family where there is a brain injury, that sometimes they feel like they're holding on to that ride flying solo. So we have to be very aware of that. Think about the types of supports that you can set up. Yes, there are support groups. Unfortunately, I'd have to openly say that there are not quite as many or enough, not nearly enough, support groups for children who are suddenly in this situation as there are for adults. And a lot of times they are the informal support groups that happen by the support people in a child's life, both personally and professionally, and not necessarily a formalized support group. So it is very important to really listen and respond to our youngest victims, who are the small voices of children whose parents have had a brain injury. We know that there's a difference between hearing and listening, and that the discrepancy becomes even wider when there are so many landmines in between. Some additional resources for you. The Lash and Associates Publishing has, here's a link that have great books that you can share with your children. The story of I Know You Won't Forget and the Storybook Toolkit these are all great support to read with and give you some ideas and some preparation for what your children, whether they're yours personally or yours because you work with them, but they're still yours, what they may need through this struggle and through this process. Here's my contact information, and please feel free to contact me at any point by email or phone if you would like more information. It's interesting that not knowing who the primary audience in a webinar of this topic might be, you try to approach it from the aspect of the variety of different stakeholders. But as the professionals who are participating, if you would like to see future webinars that are specific to the role of the professional in the life of a child with brain injury, as well as any other topics, please feel free to contact the Brain Injury Association. There's a poll question that we didn't launch, which is sort of after the fact at this point, but it was, do you know who your supports are? And so let me just ask that you think about whether or not you know who your supports are, and try to put that information together. And please always feel free to reach out to the Brain Injury Association because we're in that who's on my team circle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tannenbaum. That was a great presentation. You shared lots of really wonderful information with us today. I just wanted to share a little information about us and our upcoming events before we moved on to the question and answer portion. So if you'd like, you can start submitting those and we'll get to those at the end. Do you want to move to the next slide, Dr. Tannenbaum?
Yes.
Perfect. This is our contact information if you'd like to get in touch with us or visit our website. And we are the statewide nonprofit membership organization that advocates on behalf of individuals with brain injuries and their families.
Bridget, I'm just going to go back because I went pass that one quickly. So because we want to make sure that people have that information.
Sure.
I know they'll have it in their handout, but if there's someone who has an immediate need to
Sure.
look at it, I'll just give it another second.
No problem.
Okay.
All right, and we have lots of great free resources ranging from our monthly webinars regarding children and veterans to pamphlets and DVDs. We're also working a lot with concussion management in schools, so if you'd like to get copies of these resources, please contact us. We do have them available electronically on our website as well. And these are just a few more of our resources that we have available regarding sports concussions, and these are also available through the CDC if you're interested in getting them.
One thing I just thought of in terms of the booklets that we have that are specific for different professionals, such as educators, school nurses, etc. The participants can also feel free to contact us to get some more information about those booklets.
Definitely. And this is actually a very exciting event that Dr. Tannenbaum is working on. So Dr. Tannenbaum, do you want to let everyone know a little bit more about it and how they can get involved?
I certainly would, because this has been sort of a Herculean effort. We have put together our very first annual statewide walk for brain injury. It's March is Brain Injury Awareness Month, and we will be culminating the month by having this event on the walkway over the Hudson, which spans from Highland to Poughkeepsie. And we're hoping that you will join us. Survivors and caregivers are going to be joined by many civilian and military groups who are coming out to support awareness, prevention, and intervention in the area of brain injury.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for that. The next thing I wanted to let everyone know about is regarding our upcoming professional symposium, and that is latest developments in brain injury identification, rehabilitation, and treatment. And that is taking place at the Albany Marriott on June 5th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And if you're interested in attending, please visit our website for more information and registration details.
Yes, in particular, those participants who are professionals in the webinar today might consider or should consider being part of the professional symposium, because it will really give you a great toolbox of information in this area.
And then at the same location on that same day, we will hold a brain injury specialist certification. So please note that there are requirements, so make sure you review those details on our website. I know one of you asked a question regarding this, so this would definitely be a good slide to have that would answer your question regarding what you need to become a brain injury certified specialist. So make sure to check out that link. And then last but not least, we will be holding our 32nd annual conference on June 5th to June 6th in Albany, once again taking place at the Albany Marriott. So please visit our website for more information on that. We would love to see you there. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Twitter for news and updates about the association. They're both great tools to stay informed. We're pretty much routinely updating that daily, and it's a really good tool to stay kind of in touch with us and, you know, about our news and our updates. And okay, so just a quick reminder before we move on to the question and answer section. Any questions that are not addressed, I encourage you to email to me. I would be happy to get them to Dr. Tannenbaum. Again, you will receive my contact information in a follow-up email from GoToWebinar. Please visit our website for more information about our upcoming events, webinars, and to view the recording from today's presentation or to download the presentation slides. We expect the recording to be up by the end of next week, so you can check our website out for that. All right, so we have a good 10-15 minutes for questions, so we can get started now. So let's see. We have lots of comments, Dr. Tannenbaum, about how wonderful your presentation was, so I want to let you know that.
Thank you.
What military organizations are joining the Walk Over the Hudson? Are you familiar with that?
Uh-huh. The military organizations include, they're not limited to, but they include the Putnam County Veterans Services Agency, the Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a team of veterans through West Point and other areas who help veterans reintegrate back into their communities through physical fitness. The Honor Flight group, which flies families out to injured military service personnel, and the Stewart Air Force Base personnel.
Great, thank you. This individual wants to know if there's any data on the effectiveness of plan therapy for children coping with a parent suffering from TBI.
On what type of therapy?
Plan therapy, or play therapy, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. Yes, you can find information regarding that. I think that just from my own perspective, there are several studies that you can look at, but from my own perspective, we know that what comes across through play therapy is so informative in terms of what's happening. And this expression has been used in the realm of developmental disability, but I think it definitely applies to this question, which is a child will show you the way in so that you can show them the way out. And I think that's very appropriate here, because through play, a child will show you where to access their need, and by entering a child's world through that level, you can then help them to see their way out.
Excellent, thank you. I just want to remind everyone, the webinar will be available online, a recording of it, by next week, and a copy of these slides are also currently available online. So if you're looking for those, they're there. We're getting lots of questions just regarding whether or not this is going to be recorded, but it is. So I just want to let everyone know that. So the next question is, do you recommend bringing children to support group meetings with the parent?
The answer is sort of, it depends. I think that it would be my recommendation. I think that my recommendation would be to be part of that support group yourself first and see what the climate of that group is. In some cases, it may not be conducive to support group, like if you're going to an open support group, let's say, and there's a lot of things being expressed that don't necessarily apply or might make it more difficult. So just a heads up to know who's in that group, the type of climate there. And yes, always, I think that the larger the number, the more supported people feel. And so being part of the support group gives children, especially if there are other children of parents with brain injury, give them that peer support factor that they may not be getting, although they may have their own peers at home, in the community, and at school. They don't have other peers who are experiencing the same issues in life, and so a support group on that level would be great.
Thank you. The next question is, what's the best way to handle a situation where the child is away, for example at college, and they are notably upset and withdrawn about a parent's injury situation at home?
I'm trying to figure out if they're away, how it's notably, perhaps they mean in terms of their grades, or they're withdrawing in their connection. So a couple of things run through my mind at once. First, of course, is to make sure that all information related on the onset and throughout is done to the greatest degree possible face-to-face. I think it's easy to get lost in the explanation and the response when it's not face-to-face. If they're notably upset because, as I said, their grades are going down, or there's some behavior that's identifiable, then I think it would be best in particular to address it face-to-face and try to contact and connect with the support group.
Great.
And also to speak with, it's always difficult at a college level because they will not speak to a parent typically in post-secondary, but it's great for them to be informed and to make sure that the social worker or whomever is located at the school be accessible to that young person as well.
Thank you. Actually, I have a comment from someone that just said, I just referred, hold on 1 second. Oh, we're getting a lot of questions in. Someone suggested referring daughters to counselors at college. That kind of helps with the grieving process, and it's a friendly ear to listen to, so that's a suggestion. Let's see. So our next question is going to be, how can one encourage a very young child to seek support when they are so withdrawn?
Again, I would start with framing, giving the information and then framing some potential questions like, I'm wondering if you're worried about, and just giving some outline and structure for them to communicate with you, and also through their drawings.
Great. I think that's the last of our questions. I just wanted to read a few comments that some of the audience members had. We have one that says that they are with Child Life Specialists and they're listening, and they would like to mention that they are a supportive system often available in a hospital or rehab setting, and many of the things that you are mentioning is supported through their services. So they are, once again, Child Life Specialists, if anyone is interested in that. Someone else also mentioned that LASH, L-A-S-H, also has a free online magazine, Journey, Hope, Help, and Healing. They posted a link. I'll be sure to post it on our website, or someone can email me if they're interested in obtaining that.
Yes, the link that I had posted on the children's books is through Lash and Associates, and so going through the link you post or the one I posted about the books will get you to the place where there are some great resources.
Great. And someone else mentioned that if the parent is in the military, the child can actually be connected to a local MFLCS who are in each state and who can provide free counseling with Military OneSource. So I think you also mentioned that in one of your slides as well.
Yeah, Military OneSource has a great portfolio of services and programs.
Great. And I think, do you want to discuss the FACS program at all, Dr. Tannenbaum? I think that would be something good to mention.
Yes, that's absolutely. So for those of you who don't know what the FACS programs are, the FACS coordinators work with families of children with brain injury or in families where there is brain injury, and they work in families where the children are 22 or under, and they can assist with community needs, with connecting with agencies, with going into the schools with you and helping get the supports that are needed in that setting. I don't want to leave anything out, so is there...
There's definitely more information on our website regarding, especially if you're interested in finding out who your regional coordinator is. You could always call us as well. We can direct you straight to them. Like Lois mentioned, it's before the injury has to be before 22, but we can definitely get you set up and get you more information regarding that.
And they are in every region across the state, so it would be great to look at the website and see who your representative is.
Okay, I think that unless anyone else has any questions, we just got a few. We have someone that said a veteran who suffered from a TBI prior to their 21st birthday is eligible for services under the Medicaid waiver. And, just to make this clear, the injury has to be before the age of 22, but as long as it was sustained prior to that, we can assist you no matter how old you are. So you could have been injured at 18, and if you're 54 now, we can still help you out. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you, Sharon Johnson, for that.
Yes, and thank you, Sharon. That's a very good point, because it is sadly incredible to me how often I am called in to work with someone who is way beyond the age of 22 and their injury occurred prior to, and unfortunately they did not know where to reach out for help, which is why we do the webinars and the community outreach so that people know where to get the help.
Mm-hmm. And with regards to the TBI waiver, we can also direct you to someone that can help you enroll, a regional resource specialist. So you can always call us as well to get that information. So you're not scouring the web for that. We can give you the direct contact.
Right, and there are different waivers, for different categories. So if you're prior to the age of 22, it would go through the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD, and if you call one of the offices of OPWDD in your area, they have what's called a front door person who can help you get started in that process. If you're over that age, then the Department of Health has the TBI waiver. In terms of the military connection to the TBI waiver, I don't have all of the information, but I do know in working with some veterans that if they're covered through the Veterans Administration and services, then sometimes it's an either or. So the best thing to do if there's a military question at all is to seek out a veteran services officer in your area, because no one is going to know exactly the haves and have-nots as well as a VSO in your area.
Yes, definitely. And just before we close up, I just wanted to clarify, MFLC stands for Military Family Life Consultants. They do free counseling for military members and their loved ones on a variety of issues and are separate from Military OneSource. Thank you, Louise, for that, just to clarify, just in case anyone wants to look into that. But if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap it up. So I want to thank Dr. Tannenbaum for her fantastic presentation. I really hope that you all found it as informative and educational as I did. And I want to thank you all for participating. Please continue to spread the word about our monthly webinars. And again, we have lots of wonderful resources, so please don't hesitate to ask about them. If you have any questions that weren't answered, please send them to me. I know Dr. Tannenbaum would be delighted to answer them for you. Thank you so much, everyone, again, and please have a wonderful day. Thank you, Dr. Tannenbaum.
Thank you all.